Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another video here to share a little bit about Hawaiian history. Today, we're going to be talking about the Constitution that was signed in 1887. Here we have the Bayonet Constitution diluting the monarchy. So, at this point in Hawaiian history, um, this isn't actually really the first time that America and British have set and established a strong amount of influence over Hawaii. However, what was significant about this time is that this was a group of gunmen who were basically surrounding King Kalakaua, who basically forced him to sign this constitution that would give them more powers. And this is really a theme during this time of U.S. and British imperialism, this brute force unnegotiating per se. They did a lot of very similar things in China, and so it's important that when we look at this and look at this time, um, that this was not just isolated to Hawaii, but it was very much so a very common thing that happened to a lot of Asian countries. Japan was kind of in a similar way told by America, like, hey, the world is modernizing and you need to open your borders. China, they were blasting their way in to make sure that they can get access to inner China, especially the British, and then that's where they had the Opium Wars. And so, not to get too sidetracked, but I want to make a note as we're learning more here that this is a part of a broader strategy by imperialists that kind of we've asked you once, we've asked you twice. Okay, here you go. Um, we're going to force you to sign this. So this was a group of the oligarchy who will eventually be the same group that will force the queen to relinquish her power and overthrow her and set up a mock government per se that would be recognized by America. So it's important to make a point as to what these provisions were. So a part of this, it very much so limited the voting restrictions for male citizens. So men men who wanted to vote, there were a lot more um, requirements as to what they needed. So a lot of it had to do with either some type of land ownership or a certain amount of income, and so those people who met those could um, vote, and that became a significant problem for a lot of Hawaiians, obviously, because we've already had the Great Mahele, which is a massive land division by King Kamehameha III that takes place. And so, in that, a lot of Hawaiians lost a lot of land power. But we also then see that Hawaiians have really been pushed out of a lot of labor jobs by Chinese and Japanese and then the Portuguese. Um, and so, this very much so took a lot of power out of Native Hawaiians' ability to make and vote and decide where they wanted their country to go, what they wanted their country to do. This also had provisions that restricted Asian voting rights for Chinese and Japanese. And as another context, Hawaii was filled at this point um, with a lot of Chinese and Japanese people who were the laborers for a lot of these plantations, and we see this gradual progression from the Chinese becoming a good majority of the people to them no longer wanting the Chinese, so then they bring in the Japanese to create some racial tension and class division, and then we see the Portuguese who come over and they kind of supersede over Chinese, Japanese, and Hawaiians because they are of lighter skin. So we see this strategized um, system here that the oligarchy is creating and creating class systems in a way by race and the Portuguese being kind of the top of those races. Um, and it was a situation where they were always looking at how they can get the most compliant and the cheapest labor. So restricted voting rights for those people. Substantial power was taken from the monarchy, so this really was reducing the executive rights, what the monarchy could specifically, legislation they could individually make. Also, voting rights were given to foreigners, so there was a provision in here that allows more white foreigners who are coming in to establish businesses to have more rights. I think in their mind, from what we're seeing in history, is that there is this sense that if whoever owns the land and is bringing in the money to the state should have the power. And as we see in settler colonialism, this is majority going to be um, Anglo-Saxon men who are coming in, and they want that power. They want to be able to control the resources and control the agriculture and imports and exports of Hawaii. And then lastly, within this, the um, the monarchy, again, the executive powers were reduced, but to speak specifically, this very much so limited um, the monarchy's ability to address the cabinet members or fire cabinet members, because the way it was working is that there was the king and then there was this kind of group of white men who were also a part of the legislative process. But in between those were cabinet members who would be executing or executing tasks or executing parts of the monarchy. And so the assembly, in a way, kind of like US Congress, was the ones who had the power to um, vote in cabinet members or allow those cabinet members to work in those positions. And so it was this, if you look at, it's this situation where the oligarchy establishes who's going to work under the monarchy, and then you very much see kind of this puppet master situation, because the monarchy is there um, kind of just as a symbol, and the real people who are in charge is the oligarchy. So the Bayonet Constitution was a very divisive situation for Hawaii, and Hawaiians at this point have gradually been losing any amount of say in what happens in Hawaii and any amount of control. But at this point, this was a very definitive point that Hawaiians are no longer really in charge at all of any aspect of Hawaii. And so we see that this impacts drastically Hawaii's political and social landscape, because the monarchy has been stripped of their power. Thus, the monarchy does not have much say into what is going to happen with the state and how Hawaii is going to interact with other international entities. And this is just really paving the way. This is a part in the journey from 1875 of paving the way to U.S. Um, or to annexation, but then U.S. statehood. And so, very important for the Hawaiian people. We can see that in their right to self-determination. This was very much so a step backwards, and effectively, Hawaiians no longer really had a voice in where they wanted the country to go. So, as we progress into the future stage, we're going to see the Queen come in, and she's going to be advocating very strongly for more power given back to given back to the monarchy, so that Hawaiian people have a voice again. To which the same group of people do not like that. So in the end, the Bayonet Constitution is a great and important part of Hawaiian history to know. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I would love to kind of dialogue about that. But yeah, thank you for listening, and hope you found this valuable. I'll have more videos coming up, and we'll see you on the next one.